This tennis player's forehand is about to go from good to great in just a few minutes, focusing on one simple tip. Better yet, that one tip is going to fix 6 common forehand problems without her thinking about any of them. Here's a hint on what that tip was from legendary coach Chubbs Peterson.
It's all in the head. Yeah, it's all in the hips. It's all.
Here's what her forehand looked like before that tip. Watch her hips and her back foot closely. And here's what her forehand looked like after. Again, watch her hips and her back foot. Before we talk about what the specific tip was and what the drills were that we did together to make this improvement, we need to unpack the concept of the kinetic chain and talk about what it is specifically. I know you've heard that phrase before, but the details are super important. Basically, the kinetic chain describes the flow of energy in an ideal order up and out through the body and into the ball. And we're gonna look at a couple different sequences here. Sequence 1, Novak's momentum, or his body weight, is going from his right foot, his back foot, to his left foot first. This kicks off the flow of energy. Next, I want you to watch the alligator on his leg relative to the rest of his swing. And look at how that alligator starts to turn inwards before the racket ever starts actually pulling forwards. So there's a rotation here that's happening internally from his back leg. His knee is turning towards the court. That's turning his upper leg in towards the court. And then what happens next is his hips start to turn. And then what happens next is his chest starts to turn and rotate forwards. And now we have this flow of energy. This is the chain that we're talking about, going up from the ground, up his leg, into his hips, into his chest. And now we have this whole body chain of rotation that's happening and pulling his arm and then finally his racket along with it. So these big parts of the body are leading the swing while his arm and his racket follow behind. And it's that order of big, strong muscle groups leading and small muscle groups following that is key to the kinetic chain. And so by the time, because all of this has been set in motion from his knee to his hips to his torso and then his arm and his racket following behind, by the time the ball touches the strings, his hips, his torso, his chest are all in a fully facing forward position. And the timing of that unwinding is critical. If they don't unwind by the time the ball touches the racket, then some other part of the body has to do more work. Here's a player, Iga, with a very different style of hitting the ball, a very different grip, very different style of forehand, but we're going to look at those same principles at play here. First, watch how her momentum kicks off with a transition from her back foot to her front foot. And now she doesn't have an alligator on her leg, but I want you to watch for the cut, a little like triangle in her shorts here, how that starts to transition forwards first. That is turning this knee in. And then after that triangle starts to rotate, her hips start to rotate. And then along with that, her chest and her whole torso starts to unwind. And just like Novak, even though her elbow and her hand and her grip are in a very different position, her arm, her elbow, her hand, and her racket are all being pulled along and led by the unwinding of those big parts of the body. So by the time she hits, just like Novak, even though her style of hitting is very different, her hips are fully facing forwards, her chest is fully facing forwards, and I want you to look in particular now at how her back knee has turned to face forwards and her foot has pivoted and fully released, and now all of her energy and momentum is on her front foot. With those principles in mind, let's go back to my student's original forehand, and we're going to see her kick things off just like the professional players, starting to transition her energy from her back foot to her front foot. But then as we inch forward in the video, I want you to watch how, if you can imagine, Iga had that triangle right here, Novak had the alligator right here, and I want you to watch, is that starting to turn forwards? And the answer is no. Her hips are still facing towards the camera, but her upper body is starting to unwind. And look at how her back foot is still planted and down, and her back knee is still facing towards the camera. And so when we inch forwards and go to contact, we'll see that she's still anchored down here. Her hips are not facing forwards. Her shoulders are, but there's a bottleneck that's happening right here. Everything below her waist has gotten stuck. It has not transitioned, which means all the energy that she could have transferred from the ground and then up into her torso to help unwind and help smoothly transition powerful energy from the ground up into the racket, it's been cut off. There's a bottleneck, and that flow of energy in the chain has been broken because her hips have not transitioned forwards. And what that means is everything above this line is going to have to work a little bit harder in order to produce the full high-quality shot that she's looking for. And this mismatch in energy, when some part of the chain is broken, and we don't get the full effect of the entire flow of the kinetic chain, then efficiency breaks down, things get tight, things get more jerky. It's harder to control where the ball goes because movements are more tight and rigid and not as smooth. And this is what was leading to problems with my students' swing. Here's a side-by-side look. So visually, you can just really see the contrast here. Notice the back foot, notice the back knee, and then notice the position of the hips at contact. To my student's credit, she's a great athlete. From the waist up, she still managed to get her body and her hand and her arm in a pretty good position at contact. So at least she understood this idea and she was trying to make it happen, but there was just a big break in the chain below her waist. If you want to continue your journey towards the biggest, most powerful, most effortless forehands possible, then make sure to go to forehandpower.com and pick up the free step-by-step training that I have there that will show you how to add 15 miles per hour of pace to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice. There's step-by-step drills, detailed explanation that will show you how without a partner, without a coach, even without a ball machine, you can head to your local courts today, follow the step-by-step guidance that I give you, and literally add 15 miles per hour of pace to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice. Everything you need is there, and it's all free. Just go to forehandpower.com. All right, so here's the tip, the one thing, okay? I gave her one thing to think about. By the way, she's wearing a different outfit here because we captured the footage of her forehand, which she wanted to work on the day before. She was part of my 5-day trip to Costa Rica. So we captured the starting footage the day before, right at the end of the day, and then we picked things up again the next day to actually work on her technique. I told her one thing, make sure that your hips are leading the swing, and make sure that they're facing forwards before the ball actually gets to your racket. So step one here in the training is just simply to focus on the hips and make sure that they're leading the way. And so in real life, this would be a little bit exaggerated. That's a good thing for training. She's reaching a fully forward-facing position way before she would actually hit the ball in this shadow swing. I like to see that as a coach when the ball is not there. Because when the ball comes into play, she's probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. So it's great on a shadow swing to see her go to one end of the spectrum. So she's doing a combination here of shadow swings and eventually hits. I'm just tossing underhand on the other side of the courts. And this is her very first attempt to make this happen and actually have her energy fully release with her lower body, fully unwind with her torso. And this is a beautiful position right out of the gates. She's a great athlete, very coordinated, and took a break from tennis. She played quite a bit as a kid, took a break as an adult, and now she's coming back to it. And so here's her execution right out of the gate from the service line. She did such a great job immediately. She showed me and just demonstrated a lot of awareness and a lot of ability to just follow exactly what I was asking her to do. But again, I want to highlight the fact that I'm just giving her one singular thought. Get the hips facing forwards by the time the ball touches the strings. And I'm just allowing her to sort everything else out athletically in terms of like coordination on her own without giving her any additional thoughts or like cluttering her mind with any other technical stuff. She did so well from the service line that next I pushed her back to the baseline and we did the same sequence of a couple of shadows where she's practicing leaning with her hips. And now these are her first ever hits from the baseline where I'm just feeding her an easy ball. And By the way, same exact feed as our evaluation video that we shot the day before, where she said, I want to work on my forehand. I'm not very confident in it. It's kind of spraying all over the place. It doesn't feel very smooth. So I just fed her some from the net, just like I'm doing here. And the contrast here visually, while she focuses on just this one singular thing, is incredible. And so many other things are falling into place. This is critical. Those of you who are tennis players, you're passionate about improving, but maybe even more so, those of you who do some coaching and you're helping guiding other players, finding the root element is critical. The thing that other stuff is built on top of and will improve if you get a good move in the right direction is critically important to be able to target, because your student can only focus on one thing at a time. They can't juggle 3, 4, 5 different commands all at once. So picking the one thing that helps all the other things is critical. And this player actually improved a bunch of different elements just by focusing on unwinding the hips and nothing else. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Here's her before forehand on the left and her after forehand on the right. Look at the back foot position on each of these swings, how this foot is stuck down and this foot is transitioned forward. Look at her back knee, how it's stuck on the left and it's transitioned forwards on the right. Look at her hips, how her hips are stuck on her original one and now they've unwound. And what does that do further down the chain? Because her back foot, knee, and hip have all released, now look at the improvement in her contact position. She's making contact further out in front, which is something that a lot of players work on, but it's a symptom of their kinetic chain being out of whack. She's improved that without us talking about it, without me bringing it up, without me asking her to hit further out in front. She just is, because she's moving her entire body more athletically. Now what's really cool is because she has this extra distance between the racket and her body, her follow through is going to be more relaxed and less strained. This one on the right where her hips actually released, I want you to look at her arm, and now look at her arm on the left, how you can see her muscles. She's got more flexing happening with her forearm, and her arm kind of hooks a little bit more. Her follow through on the right is more smooth and passive, and it ends up being a longer, smoother follow through. Look at how her hand finishes all the way back behind her head, whereas the one where her hips got stuck, look at how her hand comes to a stop right by her left ear. It's almost in front of her head. And so her racket has taken a longer, more full circular path with this new one. And it's all because of the trickle down effect that's happened, or I guess trickle up. The energy has trickled up through her body more athletically, more efficiently, more smoothly, and it helps fix all these other things just because she focused on her hips. That's how this player made 6 forehand improvements by focusing on just one thing. I hope this is super helpful for you. If you want to continue upgrading your forehand, hitting it more powerfully, make sure to go to forehandpower.com, where I'll show you step-by-step drills to hit your forehand with 15 miles per hour or more speed in just 15 minutes of practice. Thanks for watching today. Hope you really enjoyed it. I'll talk to you again in the next lesson.